Robert, just before I allow a couple of my other guests to come in, they all want to come in actually, a question from me about Israel just recently admitted to the OECD, just recently given a favoured trade deal with the EU. It seems inexplicable to me that A, they were given these things while remaining so obviously thuggish and arrogant.
Well, yes. I mean, look at the most obvious case, Eamon, which is the way in which Western security agencies and the Western military continue to assist, not only in intelligence information, but with military hardware, the State of Israel. Weapons, particularly American weapons, of course, which are then used against the Palestinians. Over and over again, when I've gone into Gaza after Israeli air raids, people have come up to me with bits of bombs, and there on the computer coding at the side, it shows clearly it was made by Boeing or Lockheed in factories in the United States. If we could somehow switch off the military tap, then Israel would have much less reason to turn angrily to the West and say, you're not supporting us enough, because in that case, militarily, we wouldn't be. The French have a very close intelligence and military relationship with the IDF. The British do too, especially in intelligence. They give Israel information about Palestinians in Britain, for example. This is the kind of thing we should look at saying, well, hold on a second, we can't go on supporting an army which behaves like a rabble, which is, by the way, how the Arab armies behave. Don't let's be romantic about that. And we can't go on. But, of course, again, that's not going to happen.
Okay, Mick Wallace. John. Robert.
Robert, sorry.
Yeah, okay. Bob, if you like.
Are you surprised that Barack Obama hasn't changed much, and that the role that the Americans have taken in the Middle East is very similar as it would have done under his Republican predecessor?
No, I'm not. We like to think that government's about good guys and bad guys, but they're not. Governments are about power and the use of power. And in the United States, the power of what we like to call the Israeli lobby, which is actually a right-wing Liquidist Israeli lobby, is so great that no American president has freedom of movement on the Middle East where it concerns Israel. Presidents, before they take over, think they will, but it's not like that, because basically Congress and the Senate are in the hands of Israel's supporters, and it's as simple as that. Anyone who, in the Congress or Senate, who seriously opposes Israel will find that they're no longer congressmen or senators after the next election, and they make sure that any American president comes to heel, by the way. Now, the point, of course, is that under Bush, at least we knew where we stood. Under Obama, he hands out these sort of rather blushing contributions to humanitarianism, but actually nothing happens. We've seen over and over again, whenever Obama has stopped the settlement building, Netanyahu has effectively told him to go to hell, and he just remains silent. We had the same issue over the sudden announcement of the building of Jewish homes in East Jerusalem when Joe Biden was visiting, and Mrs. Clinton said Mr. Obama is very, very angry, and Mr. Netanyahu said go to hell. And the plans continue. Joe Biden is now coming out, oddly enough, supporting Israel yet again on the attack on the aid boats. So there's no change, and there will not be, because American policy in the Middle East is not in the hands of the United States of America. That is a fact.
Robert, would you stay with us while we're taking that break? We just have a couple more questions for you.
Sure, yeah.
We're really grateful to you. Thank you, Robert. Taking that break now and return. Welcome back to the programme. My guests this morning are John Waters, Simon Carswell, finance correspondent of the Irish Times, the editor of the Sunday Tribune, Noirin Hegarty, and Mick Wallace, builder and developer. And our guest on the phone for the next few minutes is Robert Fisk, the London Independent's Middle East correspondent. He's in New York and very kindly agreed to take a call from us. Noirin, you wanted to ask a question of Robert.
Yeah, hello, Robert.
Hi.
I'm curious to know what the reaction among ordinary Israelis is as the week has progressed, because initially you had the attack and it was on a Turkish ship, and then the New York Times came out. Then you had it was the Rachel Corrie. It was an Irish ship, which is kind of more acceptable almost in Western terms, or is more shocking, maybe perhaps is the word I'm looking for. And I'm wondering whether ordinary Israelis are becoming more hardline in their views, or whether they're recognising that there is world outrage of what occurred.
Well, I think first of all, the interesting thing is that the Israeli press has been the most courageous in condemning what Israel has done. In fact, the Israeli press has basically been saying the things that most Western papers, particularly in America, should have been saying, whereas some of the papers, particularly the Canadian press, read as if they should be the Jerusalem Post. It's very odd, there's sort of transfer where the Israeli journalists are doing our job and a lot of journalists in the West are doing what they think wrongly is Israel's job. It's interesting, I've just been taking part in the Turkish radio broadcast with Israelis. A fairly tense one, as you can imagine. And quite a number of Israelis were saying, obviously they were talking to very educated people, but some of them were supporting the Israeli government. Of course, they had a government spokesman who churned out the usual stuff. But quite a number of Israelis were condemning what had happened. And one of them said, look, I don't know if Palestinians can hear your program, but we are with them. We denounce what happened. Now, you can say, of course, that in Israel, being a democracy, they can say that, whereas Arabs could not contradict their own leadership. Not quite true, but almost. But it is a fact that many Israelis are very disturbed at what has happened. And in fairness, it's newspapers like Haaretz, with their excellent journalists, who do much better than we do in covering the Middle East, who are coming out first and saying, look, this is a terrible stain on the state of Israel. It says a lot about the lack of restraint of our so-called, democratic and restrained and humanitarian army. And I question it very sincerely. It is also interesting, by the way, and this is, I suppose, a retrograde thing, that nobody, not the Israeli government spokesman, which uses the name of the ship, nobody on air has so far mentioned that Rachel Corrie, the ship, is named after the young American girl who was driven over twice by an Israeli bulldozer as she tried to defend a Palestinian house in Gaza. But it's interesting, in most of the broadcasts you don't hear, well, who was Rachel Corrie? And even Netanyahu is talking about the ship Rachel Corrie, apparently not realizing who she was.